So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the new series of the First Time CEO podcast. Our guest today is Nisha Tijare, a Senior Director of Sales Development APAC at Oracle, and an illustrious leader. She spent her career building high performing sales teams, from leading virtual sales at Cisco to heading inside sales for India and SARC at VM to now driving pipeline strategy across Oracle's APAC region. Beyond the numbers, Nisha is also a vocal advocate for authentic leadership and breaking stereotypes in the industry, a perspective I am very excited to dig into today. So please welcome Nisha. And Nisha, would like to know some more details about you from your side.
No, thank you so much for inviting me to this session. It's an honor. You've covered a large part of my career. As a human being, I am as vulnerable as anyone else and continuously exploring and curious by nature. That's what I am. And I'd love to have this conversation with you.
Superb, Nisha. So let us start from a question which most leaders have. Every leader has a defining moment that changes the way they lead. And what was yours? If it was a turning point or it was a pivot, would love to know more from you.
I think we're not starting on a right note, but because I believe we kind of do a bit of injustice to leadership stories when we talk about one defining moment. It leadership for none of us change overnight. My journey hasn't been, like a lightning strike. It has been more like software updates, patches, a bit of software bug and me improving hopefully year on year. But yes, there's a conversation I'd like to talk about, that definitely changed the way to some extent I lead people. And this goes back when I was early in my leadership journey, 15 years back, a very confident individual contributor who'd become a leader. I was blessed to be working with some of the finest stars, at great team. And I would be very excited and enthusiastic to kind of step in and help them before they fail, solve all the problems before it gets escalated. My team members would come, and they'd say, okay, we're going for a difficult customer meeting. Why don't you join us? And I'd happily oblige. I'd come home, pat myself, very proud that I'm building a comfortable team. They are comfortable reaching out to me. I'm always there with answers, happy to help. And I was having a similar conversation with my mentor, trying to boast about how fantastic a leader I have become. And he politely asked me, have you thought that you could be the bottleneck to the growth of your team? And even now I feel cold when I recall that conversations. And rightly so, not with a bad intent, but I definitely was mollycoddling my team, trying to be overprotective. Um, that was not a giant leap in my career, but that conversation definitely shifted my mindset, from I definitely changed the way I lead people thereon. I tried to give more room for people to think, for people to fail, and eventually for people to grow. That incident reminded me one thing which I carry even today, that leadership is not about showcasing your capabilities. It's about defining someone else's. So yeah, I that's the most valuable conversation for me so far.
Very profound realization because when you said your leader asked you whether you are the bottleneck for your team, I think that is something that compels us to think, and our leadership journeys are also defined by the way we perceive these questions that compel us to think differently. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing this profound learning, Nisha. Now, we all have our own journeys, but in your experience, what leadership behavior is most often misunderstood? And what do you think is the psychology behind it?
Oh, very interesting question. Okay. So, Geeta, have you ever been to a gym where most machines seem comfortable to you?
Frankly, no.
Neither have I. Okay. If there's some trainer who tells you that, he's training you to be comfortable and won't hurt or push you at all, you've signed up for a spa, not a gym. Yet, when we come to work, we expect growth without discomfort. And hence, I believe that the most misunderstood leadership quality is the willingness to be temporarily unpopular. We forget that, leadership is not a popularity contest, it's a stewardship. Okay, I have worked with leaders who've pushed me and made me do things that at times I thought unachievable. I've come home, cried, felt nervous. It was never easy. It was never easy. But what they built in me was the comfort for discomfort, and that's very important. I'll tell you a incident that happened in my team. Some years back, we were doing fantastic well, and I decided to change the KPIs, the way we measure success for my team. We were doing fantastically well, and as expected, I had a lot of pushbacks. My team members would come to me. They are like, are we raising bar too much? Somebody would come and tell me, everything's working fine. Why do we want to break things that are working fine? I even had people telling me, we'd have great attrition, people not comfortable with it, because that change demanded them to be more accountable, to be transparent, to have more ownership, which they were not comfortable with. Uh, I had a choice, I could continue, take a safe bet and be the popular leader, or, take the risk of trying something different which would make them more relevant few years later. Interesting fact, 6 months down the line, the same people were advocating the change. We had the highest number of promotions to senior level within the organization after that change, because you don't grow in comfort. The truth is, lies when you are uncomfortable about something, and that's a very rare leadership quality. Throughout the tenure, we forced to say, be popular, be good, but popular leaders don't make great leaders. Your main aim is to make organization better, not make your team's life comfortable. And I think that once we understand, the decision making's better, the judgment gets better. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing I'll don't worry, don't try to be popular. It's okay to be unpopular.
Exactly. And very few leaders have the courage to be unpopular. Most of them want to be focused more on being popular, liked, and as we say, nothing ever grew in the comfort zone. Nothing new ever
Absolutely.
grows, nothing evolves. So, again, a great learning. And Nisha, a lot of true leaders I've observed are not the textbook leaders. They are people who have actually grown through the system, they've experimented, and no experiment comes with its own pitfalls of being unpopular as well. That
Really well said.
perspective, I'm sure our audience will find very, very profound. Okay, a lot more, and I know there's so much to your persona as a leader. We often see leaders who are technically very strong, they're great at this subject matter, but they struggle to influence others. And what do you think is the underlying reason for this? Also, I would love to know from you what can they do to bridge this gap?
You gonna get me blacklisted? I am from a technology domain. I absolutely am in love with technology, but I understand where you're coming from, and it indeed is subjective. I'll try to provide my lens to that thing. I have worked with some of the finest technical architects or consultants. They are subject matter expert. They know details to the last T. We go in a customer meeting, they present the architecture diagram brilliantly, go in depth and explain the things to a certain extent that, they'd leave audience saying, wow, this guy is a genius, this girl is a genius. And then when we come back, next day, 2 days, they've forgotten about it. We have earned the respect, but not the influence. And they are two different things. And that kind of fantasizes me. If you look at behavioral science, something like a disc profile, you'd find most technology leaders leaning towards the trait of consciousness, technical depth, precision, going to details, or maybe a little bit towards dominance, execution, competence, all of it. Uh, Very rarely towards the influence side. And I think that's what was makes influence traits very important. Steve Jobs wasn't one of the best engineers amongst 10 engineers in Silicon Valley in 1984. Um, in fact, I'd say Jobs wasn't the most technically qualified person. Wozniak maybe was, in my opinion. But what Jobs had different was he could convince us that computers can represent who we are, even before we touch a computer or a button of it. Look at it, maybe Elon Musk. He does not send rockets, to spaceship because he's the best propulsion engineer in the SpaceX. No, but because he can get the government, the institutions, 26-year-old million people believing that a multi-planetary species exist. It's not a science fiction. Larry Ellison, Bill Gates, Satya Nadella, all of them create that influence. But for some of these influential people, there are also hundreds of technology leaders who could not, who had great product, but who got outbeaten by not that very competitive but loud competitor who could get their message related because what was in their head, they couldn't convince for others to see that, and that's where the influence plays a very important role. And a lot of technology leader, because they are not able to do that, die, the products die in the due process, or they themselves die in trying to create an influence in the due process. Now, what I'd say that can bridge this is purely basis what I have seen and experienced leaders doing bridging that. And I'd say number one being problem framer. Uh, it's very important, It's good, Steve Jobs didn't go and say, okay, here's the solution I have for you. He said, I'd help you create what you want. So the problem framers are those who listen to the question behind the question and says what problem the technology is solving for them. Second is creating clarity. We try, technology leaders are so obsessed with the expertise that they do not create the vision or the belief around the possibility. And I think that's what is important, getting clarity, talking in simple terms, and defining the belief, and much beyond about it. And I'll tell you, this is every time I'm stuck, I go and see what Satya Nadella does, he's not someone who outcoded the engineers at Microsoft. He kind of rewired the belief in Microsoft to have a learning mindset. That changed the way a lot of people think. And that I think is very important for influence. The way you do your narrative, the way you create a vision, and the way you communicate and create more leaders that would continue to do things even when you're not in the room. So, very important, I'd say, for someone to bridge the gap is to get clarity, to communicate, and to have a clear vision.
I think, Nisha, you've articulated it so well. And I think it gives a deep insight into what great leaders miss when they go too much towards technology and not towards influence. And I think influence is all about how well you articulate your presence and your ideas. Superbly said.
I hope
And
I am creating a little influence. I mean, if I were to say
I'm
that.
sure you are. I'm sure a lot of people are getting influenced right now. And leaders, lot to take away from today while we converse with Nisha. I hope you're all taking notes. While we continue with the podcast series, I think each leader is going to bring a very, very special perspective. So please listen on and more to know from Nisha. Nisha, uh, coming to that part, while we were talking of you wanting to know how leaders are getting influenced today, if someone watching today wanted to become a better leader over next 90 days or so, what three habits would you recommend these leaders to start practicing right away?
Okay, audience, I'm going to disappoint you. I'm not going to tell you that these are the five books you got to read or wake up at 5 a.m. I don't think anybody becomes a better leader just because the clock changes. Uh, but there are definitely three habits that have changed me in person, that I want to, and I think that may be a copy paste formula that some of you I wish would take. Um, Number one being set off 30 minutes for yourself for an uncomfortable thinking. I have not from now, I think from many, many years, been the first person to go to office. Uh, I am in the office much before the noise starts coming in and, the day begins. And I have this calendarized time for myself where I ask myself only one question. What are the assumptions I still have which are not relevant today? And I have seen that you are limited as a leader by the quality of questions you ask yourself. uh, you only become good leader if you ask right questions to yourself, and that's the self reflection time. Make yourself uncomfortable. As you grow, you may not have many leaders doing that for you. uh, so you have to do that to yourself. Second and most important, and this is very close to my heart, is try build one leader every month. I have this is my something very personal, also a purpose that I am very closely associated with, to give voice to some amazing talent who may not be the loudest in the room, but definitely very capable. As a woman, I have seen some capable professionals, downplaying themselves, and someone less talented occupying that space. Just because they exhibit confidence and they're there, and they raise their hand at the right time. So I think talent needs visibility, but to give them visibility it needs sponsorship. So always think, who are you influencing to grow because of the role that you are in. This is a position of responsibility. It's not a title that you take for your own good and for your own gain. Somebody did that favor to me. Uh, you need to give that back. So that is a second habit I'd encourage everyone to have. And third habit that I would encourage everyone to have is at the end of the week, write a sentence. What have we influenced? How will people remember you? What have you done in this week that people will remember you when you are gone? Not targets, not revenue, not even titles. The impact that you create, that would be there even when the titles are gone, when you are not in the room. That is the influence and the impact that we as leaders should strive to create. I always, my biggest scare is every time I ask myself, what's the legacy I want to leave behind? And that motivates me to dress up, to get ready, to go to work, to talk to people, to have these podcasts, to have conversations, because that's my fuel.
Exactly. And sometimes, these habits, they really transform us to the next level. And maybe, it's not required to have the same habits throughout. We can keep evolving and develop different habits, different triggers that take us to the next place. Now, this is about habits, Nisha. How about things we need to let go of in order to be there as leaders? I think we need to also let go of certain behaviors, patterns. What, in your own terms, would be that habit or behavior, or maybe anything at all?
Very interesting question. The first habit that I think one should let go of is relying too much on your past success. I've seen when I do conversation with a lot of other leaders and people, they'd refer, I used to do this, that happened, so you do that, or, I was successful because we implemented this thing. Let us copy paste and implement it in this organization. It doesn't work like that. That's why they say every day is a new day. You can obviously base your decision on your past learnings. Your experience is important, your learnings are important, your observations are important, but don't over rely on them. Another habit that as we grow we need to change, and I am an advocate of that, is uh, you know trying to be too busy. I've seen leaders' calendars filled with activities, meeting after meeting after meeting. And, we have this belief that if we are busy, we good. People are dependent on us. You can't grow if your calendars are so busy. You are just trying to be hero of today and not an architect of tomorrow's business. So the two habits I have made conscious efforts to change is uh, I try to look at everything from fresh canvas. It's a clean board. If I had an authority and autonomy to redesign it, how would it look like and what could be challenges? And another thing, like I said, I'd look at it as I don't try to be the busiest person in the room. I make conscious call to delegate, to empower, and keep space to build things and to strategize and to architect for future and not get stuck in today. And that has helped me personally a lot.
Think I could not agree more because I've seen people with very busy calendars, and believe me, I was that person once upon a time, and I still have the tendency to go back into that zone again and again. But those are the time periods I realize I'm not growing, neither am I doing valuable work. So I suppose, and I think we all realize, letting go of the parts that don't work in our calendars is one of the biggest realizations we can probably take from today. Appearing busy doesn't amount to creating value. And you've really put it across very well, Nisha. Thank you. Uh, One part which I see evolving at the workplace is we trying to act very important, whereas, something is missing in our careers. What is a pulse that you note at the workplace, which you catch at times and you feel doesn't feel right? Something needs to be different. And what is that part that needs to be evolved into? What is the part that needs to change? That little pulse that clicks continuously but can change into a different pulse.
Okay, this needs a lot of thinking, but I'll tell you. Over 25 years of my career, I've seen great leaderships. And one thing that I have realized over all these years is that as technology changes, what is needed in leadership also changes. It's not the same. And if I look at today's leaders, there are a lot of digital native companies, there are a lot of new age CEOs, a lot of leaders around. I don't see a capability dearth. Absolutely not. In fact, they are the most capable leaders that we've ever seen developing. They have access to data, they have global connection, AI is just at their hands, they're technology driven, they're well informed. So I don't see a capability gap. But if I really I do see directional gaps uh, in leadership today. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from, and what my thought process is. Again, you know, as your childhood is, that's how your behavior, your thought process is. Similarly, as you grow in career, what you have seen shapes the way you look at the world around you. Uh, I have worked in telecom, infrastructure, SaaS, applications, AI. I've seen all of this, and I'll tell you when I joined Cisco, which was the time 2015 when Chuck Robbins became the CEO. Cisco was a well-running execution engine. They didn't need a Chuck Robbins to run the old model better. Chuck Robbins did something interesting. He navigated and moved the entire capital, talent, attention to subscription, to recurring revenue, to security, something way ahead that nobody could have thought or dreamt of doing, judgment. That judgment to take decisions that would become critical to in course of company's growth, not today but few years down the line. That's what Oracle is doing today. The AI jump, the AI bet that Oracle is making today is something that would reap them benefits not today, a few years down the line. And that needs courage. That needs judgment. So that's the executive drift that I see probably little lacking in some of the leadership pulse that I see today. In the similar lines, another drift that I see is the adaptation drift. So I was in EMC Square, which is when Dell's integration with EMC was happening. Now, that's not just, bringing two different product portfolios or cultures or finances together. It was never about financial engineering. It was always about, giving that confidence to employees, to customers, to investors for several years. Now, that does not happen. Companies don't change because strategy changed. Companies change because they believe on the new strategy. So that adaptation, that change management, that is critical. I see leaders focus too much on strategy and execution, but less on the change management. And that is very important. But more important than that is the narrative drift. I I've been fortunate. I've worked with Anand Ishwaran's vision in Veeam, and he came with the vision, with the narrative that Veeam is not just a data backup company. It's about data resilience and lot more. And that narrative, we all bought into that narrative. We all worked towards realizing that narrative. That narrative drift, you know, that is leadership. That's the pulse that will make somebody successful, organizational successful. So I personally believe that we have great leaders. Uh, I see a lot of leaders developing, but from what I have observed in some of the phenomenal leaders I have worked and I've observed in my career, that one should focus on judgment, on bringing people together, aligning them to your belief, and driving a great narrative. It is very important.
So profound once again, Nisha, because typically in an organization, we talk about vision and mission. But what really is missed over there is the narrative. And a great leader realizes how to have a sound narrative to thread these into results. Superb representation. And I think we got a lot of great ideas from what Nisha is conversing. We also got to know about the leaders she's closely worked with. What were their USPs? What helped them be great leaders? And that is real time, real life wisdom. Nisha,
Yeah, we
you
all
have
work for some fantastic leaders, and the way when
agreed.
we share these stories, we compound our learnings.
Exactly. And that adds so much of real time wisdom into our leadership journeys also. So, Nisha, you've been a part of the First Time CEO program now for quite some time. And the community connect is there. We find you a very valuable leader who adds a lot of insights. What makes this community different and unique from other leadership platforms you might have experienced?
Okay, and yeah, with the caution, I'm not paid for promotion. But but I'll be very honest, and this is a personal story. I think this is one of the best decisions I have taken in my career to be a part of FTC. There's this famous line from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland that you don't know where the roads are going, any road would lead you there. As a leader, I always knew where I want to go. What I didn't know was how I need to be when I get there, the identity. FTC teaches that. It's not like a leadership program where you attend, you make notes, it inspires you, you're motivated on Friday, you go back, and Monday it's the same calendar, same meeting, same habits. No, you're not romanticizing leadership. You are demystifying the myths. We speak about how to navigate boardroom discussions, how to think like a CEO, how do you influence without authority. These are topics that change career. We all say, what got you here will not get you there. Fine, FTC tells us, so what will, and I have always appreciated that. It's the community. I would also use this platform to thank the team behind these sessions. It is difficult to get senior leaders join, share questions, talk about the assumptions they are holding on to. It needs intent, it needs genuine care, and you guys are doing a fantastic job. But more than that, the community. You're not building content, you're building community where people are free, to come, talk, share their experiences. And that makes us richer. I've always believed this, and I strongly believe this, that your ambitions either expand or contract depending on the conversations you are part of. And here we are conversing enterprise values. We are talking about succession, AI, building leaders without titles, identity, intent based identity. And so you automatically are wired to think in that direction. That is a natural cycle. It's not factory made or kind of pushed you to do something. And that is what makes this platform so unique and so different. And I am so happy I made this decision.
Thank you so much, Nisha, for that input. And we totally appreciate the inputs you bring into the community, the value you bring, the conversations we have. And the best part about it all is we never judge each other. So
Absolutely.
there are leaders who are going through a phase and they're sharing certain parts which may appear challenging and they feel, oh, I might be judged for it. But here, I think the best part is there is no judgment in sharing and inviting opinions. And I love that about our community.
Oh, 100%. There's this famous thing that when you hear these conversations, now I hate X person's boss without knowing that boss just because I know what's happening here, due to this conversation. So it's always good that we have a safe space where we can speak our heart out.
Absolutely. And Nisha, uh, would you like to answer one or two questions from our attendees?
Absolutely. I mean, happy to.
Super. So, leaders, we'll take up two questions. Who would like to ask Nisha something very pertinent about her leadership journey and anything you'd like to know how she navigated it?
So, hello, ma'am. This is Abhishek. Can I go ahead?
Yes,
Yeah.
Abhishek.
Yeah.
Hi, Abhishek. Good to see you.
Yeah, same here, man. But, ma'am, always it's pleasure hearing you. And thank Nisha for taking out time. Nisha, in your thing you mentioned that try to meet one leader once in a month. So typically, when you meet a leader, what sort of conversation you try to have? Their journey, their growth, or highlighting what individual has uh, the strength. So typically, how do you uh, take overall discussion? Because if you keep highlighting your strength area, so that might feel like you're bragging yourself, and at the same time, they may not be interested about sharing their whole journey in the initial thing. So how do you take the overall discussion?
You asking a script from a person who's the most unscripted human being on this earth. Let me first clarify two things. When I said, what I said is you make leader, not meet leader, but that's a different concept. To your thing, that is also very critical, which is around creating influence, networking, increasing your circle of influence. And that is a very important aspect. I'm glad you touched upon that because we couldn't touch upon that in our conversation. It and you rightly so, see, I come from sales. We say that every script needs to be personalized for the persona you are talking to. What I would speak with somebody who's two levels above me would not be the same with the conversation I'd had with my colleague, and will never be the same with the conversation I'd had with people who look up to me or who work with my team. But there are few frameworks that I definitely use that you can leverage. Number one is, straight research about the person. Whenever you speak with anyone, it has to be genuine. And when it's genuine, it will connect. So if you research about the person, when you know about that person, you know what value you want to get out of that person and what is it that you want to learn from that person. You are already inspired even before the conversation. Today, when I speak with my customer or an investor, or what am I talking to that person? That what is the value they bring, and what is it that I can fill in that puzzle that they don't have. When we meet somebody, it is important for us to also give them value. It is never one way street, it will never be respected. So when you plan to have a conversation, first prepare what is it that you are going to give to that person. If that answer is not ready, don't go there yes yet. That is important, that what are you going to bring to that person that you're going to speak with, and research about the person. Third thing that is very important when you talk to somebody is, don't, like you said, don't try and sell yourself. Hard selling never works. Okay. What will happen is a byproduct. Okay. Whether you are able to have an impression, whether you got an opportunity, job, a meeting, a coffee, whatever, all of those are byproducts. Never focus on outcomes. Focus on the journey. Focus on, what, just being yourself in that conversation. When we prepare too much, and when we know we want to talk about strengths and we want to talk about y and we want to talk about z, we are never listening. We are only trying to, say what we want to say. So whatever be your question, my answer is this. Good conversations are never like that. So be open. When you are open, you listen more. When you listen more, conversations will naturally flow. You will never need a script. You will never need to know what you need to talk. It will automatically come. So, and do this, it is important. Have a circle of influence. I do that. I have a diary. I am at my desk. I can show it. I have this diary. And every week, I write the two people that I have not spoken as yet till date. I will speak in this week. I will connect with them. I'll try and learn from them. I will try and add value to them. So that's a conscious exercise I do, and I've been doing for many, many years. I say with a lot of pride, but with a lot of humility, that I have some of the great mentors and coaches who there for me. I am not worried of taking bold decisions in life. I have a backup. And again, I worked in a backup company, so I keep backups ready anyways. But thank you, Abhishek.
Excellent perspective, Nisha. And I think it is time we all realize that building influence and conversations is a conscious effort. It doesn't happen naturally initially, but once you get into the zone, it is easier to connect with more and more people and track it well. Otherwise, well, we are where we were with the same circle of people who continue to add the same category of value to us. And after a time, it is all about diminishing returns. So, influence. I hope, Abhishek, you found value in that answer.
Yeah, certainly, ma'am. And I think it just I need to summarize, Nisha. So two things. The first thing, do research. Secondly, be the way what you are. And then just connect with the person based on the common interest actually. And then let's start having the discussion with them. Just one last question, ma'am, if you allow me. Uh,
Go ahead.
yeah. Another point you mentioned, Nisha, that whatever you do in that week, whatever value add you do, you try to put it in a diary. So I think after hearing, I also thought so, or I used to do, but eventually these habits go away. So how you ensure that you keep doing this habit over a long period of time?
And that's the secret sauce for success. Doing boring things. It's difficult, if you talk to a fitness expert who go to gym every day, are they motivated and do they really feel every morning like going to gym? No. You speak to marathon runners. There's a soccer thing happening. I'm a Ronaldo fan while Portugal is out, but still, you listen to speeches of Ronaldo, and he'd say he's never missed a practice session, and he emphasizes this is boring. Writing diary when you partying, it's your birthday, someone's celebrating, or you've had a bad day and you just don't feel like doing it, you have mood swings, hormonal problems, 1,000 issues. But in spite of all of that, when you still do that boring thing, that is your resilience. And only you can build your resilience. There's no formula, there's no manual. I'm a mother of two boys. I remember my motherhood, when I was pregnant, there were hundreds of people congratulating me. Nobody told me that there's a software upgrade needed in the brain to handle that role. There are no manuals for these things. That is the resilience you build in your career, and do it, because that will make you different from the rest of the world. There are only 1% people who make it top talent in any company. What is different in that 1% than the rest of 99%? The difference is grit. The difference is resilience. And it has to be a conscious choice you make. And there's no formula. Sorry, I can't give you a formula to do it. It's a boring stuff. Tell yourself tomorrow, if you want to be successful, if my kids want to see me and say, "Wow, my mom did something," I would do that. I would do that bit.
Amazing, amazing perspective, Nisha, because once I heard a very learned leader saying one thing. He said, behind every interesting leader is a lot of boring work. And these people have spent years in mastering that boring work to be so interesting in a room. And I think what you said was absolutely on point. I think all of us must take a note of this today and write it somewhere that not all boring things are actually boring. Some of them are really helping us evolve as better people and, of course, as leaders. Thanks for that perspective, Nisha. Let's take one more quick question, and let's take a very relevant question, which is going to be very, very relevant to who Nisha is. Any questions?
Hi,
Okay.
I'm Vaishali here.
Yes, Vishali.
Yeah, I would like to ask Nisha. You are disciplined, and I can vouch for that. I would like you to tell us about that is one discipline habit that you follow without fail every day, and one boring habit that you do every day without failing.
You continue to put me in problem, Vishali, isn't it?
Because I like you, I love you. Yes.
Uh, okay, one habit that I continue to do, which is boring, is asking myself my ROI. Okay. And it is very important to me. Am I worth investing? Is very important question. Okay. And what would it take for me to be more investable? And that's where I build my habits. So my habits are not built because I heard a podcast or a conversation, or maybe because I like somebody and I want to be like that person. But I look at what I need to bridge, and then that becomes my habit for next 21 days, and then obviously it comes in your mechanism automatically, and that is a conscious choice I do every year. So I'm not sure if I've shown you someday, but I'll share you that sheet. I have a habit tracker, an Excel sheet that I update in the first week of January every year, which is where I say, okay, this is what companies invested in me. This is where I want to go. So, to bridge this, what is it that I need to develop? And to achieve that, what are the habits that I need to inculcate? And to talk about it currently, attending and listening to the worksheets of FTC is one habit. It is difficult, given my role and given the schedule, but I try and make it a point that I adjust my other things to attend those learning sessions. There are worksheets, homework, at this age and this stage in life, you have to do homework. It's draining, but I do it. And I am a very sincere student. So I learn with utmost sincerity and honesty. And to your point, Vaishali, another habit of mine is I continue to learn from people around. You have taught me so many things with your brilliant heart and the genuine leadership that you carry to work every single day. I've said this to a lot of people. There's some leaders who are so selflessly, naturally, good at taking care of people and being with people. And you see them and you're amazed that how can somebody be so good and so nice. But then you learn, you take inspirations, and you try and be with in good company and let that infectious goodness come to you. So yeah, that's another thing. I hope I've answered you. And even if
Yes.
I've not, you
Yes.
say yes.
Yes, no, you have answered the right way. The answer I was looking for, because it always keeps us worrying. Like, are we adding value to our team members or to the leadership or not? And you answered it right way, the ROI. So it gives me more. It gives me one more lesson to add into my contribution to the organization and to my team. That please consider this seriously and please keep a track of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vaishali.
Thank you,
Thank you,
team.
Vishali, for that amazing question. And I think it has all triggered to for us to think on the lines of what is the ROI we are generating, and what is it that we are going to be presenting to the maybe the world or the organization, and starting with ourselves at the end of the year, end of the month, and I'd say at times even end of the day. Because I've seen leaders sometimes doing things in a day which they could not have imagined doing in a year. Some of those days require years of planning, but that one day completely pivots their entire career. So thanks
Absolutely.
a lot for that perspective, Nisha. Leaders, thanks a lot for being here. We loved having you. And once again, we are starting with the series of podcasts, which used to be so popular. And my bad that we discontinued because of my health. Now that we are here again, I assure you, we are not stopping anytime soon. And if you want to participate, write to us. Connect with us and FTC community. You just need to connect with us once again. Thank you so much. God
Thank you,
bless you.
Sugeeta.
Thank you, Nisha, for being here and for being such an amazing, amazing guest. God bless you. See you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Have a great day ahead.